to be paid in compensation to those affected by the Windrush scandal. The Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, said the compensation would help people who arrived in the UK before 1973, many from Caribbean countries, who were then wrongly detained, denied legal rights, threatened with deportation, or wrongly deported from the UK by the Home Office. He set out details of the scheme to the House of Commons.
I am confident that the proposals for the scheme are closely aligned with what affected communities wanted to see. Namely, that it is simple, it is accessible, and above all, it is fair. Full information is now available online and via a free telephone hotline number. Guidance is being provided to help people understand what compensation they might be entitled to and how to submit a claim. And the application process itself is as simple and as clear as possible.
Well, here with me now, Satbir Singh from the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants, which is a charity supporting Windrush victims. He wants it to be accessible and fair.
And I think that's quite right, it should be. And, you know, we do welcome the news that the Home Office, the government will be compensating victims of this scandal. It's only right that they should be compensated for the awful treatment they've received. But ultimately, the fear still is that this could happen again. We're not necessarily learning the right lessons. That will only happen when we get rid of some of these policies that actually led to this crisis.
Come on to that in just a moment, but what about the money? Will that make enough of a difference to those who've been affected, some of whom really badly affected by this?
Well, that money is never going to bring back the years of people's lives that were stolen from them, nor is it going to bring back, you know, people who actually lost their lives as a result of this crisis. It is a start. People who've been left destitute, left without the right to work, or left homeless, obviously do need some support to get their lives back up and running. What I want to see is that compensation being paid out very fairly, but also very quickly, because many people have been waiting a very, very long time to restart lives which have been on hold.
You're expressing a concern this could happen again. Sajid Javid making it quite clear he does not want to see anything like this happening again. So what is it the case this was a one-off, if you like?
Well, you've just got to look at the language that the government employ when talking about this. This is something that they're very sorry people experienced. This is something that happened. This wasn't an accident. This was done to people. These were policies that they were warned about. They were told that this would happen. They ignored it when it was happening. They sort of claimed that it wasn't really happening, and then it did hit them all of a sudden. This can't happen again, and the only way for that to happen is for the hostile environment to go. You've had a Home Secretary resign. You've had the entirety of the right to rent scheme found unlawful by the High Court, and now the taxpayer has been left with a £200 million bill to pay for the problems that the government willfully created. They have to think about getting rid of these policies, and that should be plainly obvious to anybody apart from, it seems, this government.
When you say that the government at the time willfully created, well, the Home Secretary at the time, of course, was one Theresa May.
Yes, and of course she's now the Prime Minister, so if there's anybody with the authority, one would hope, to get rid of these policies, it's their architect. But unfortunately we do have a government, and we see this in all areas of policy, that is beholden or in fact held hostage by a hard right that ultimately is an obstacle to making those kinds of decisions. But for this to not happen again, for the taxpayer not to be left again and again with this kind of bill, these policies have to go.
Are you satisfied that we now know everything there is to know in terms of who's been affected, or are there still people who have been wronged by this government?
I do worry that there are people out there who don't necessarily realise that what they've been affected by is in fact the Windrush crisis. I think there are people who may not be from the Caribbean who don't think that it affects them, and I would encourage them and their family members to seek help, to go online, look at the government website, find out more if it's something that's affecting them. We'll also unfortunately never really know, and that's the sad truth of it, we'll never really know how many people were deported or removed from the country illegally, because once gone it's of course very difficult to track them down, and the government didn't really do a very thorough job of looking at that. They looked at only a handful of cases rather than the whole gamut of everybody they've removed from the country. So there are unfortunately very likely to be people who are affected that just don't realise it.
Satbir Singh, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for talking to us about that.